Brilliant. All right. So welcome to the Productivity Lunch and Learn series. If you're new to Zoom, which most of us aren't, I suggest you put me on the speaker view. There are no slides. I'm going to keep this as simplified as possible. And those of you who know me, you know that I try to simplify everything because my head's not big enough to understand complex jargon and complicated frameworks. So I tend to write as I speak, or I tend to simplify everything so that it makes it easier for me to understand. So, productivity, hey? We're all keen as human beings. We want to get more things done. We want to achieve more things at work. We want to grow the business, make profit, make extra profit, all of that. But I want to kind of walk this fine line today. In terms of it's not so much a work angle as well, but our personal lives as well, because how we do one thing is how we do everything. I'm sure that's not the first time you've all heard a phrase similar to that. And I've realized that when I reflect on how I personally do things, it's it's almost impossible not to embed a lot of the things that I talk about in a work aspect or from a team aspect. It's hard not for me not to embed those things in my own life. So I've kind of been reflecting this over the last couple of months. So I thought I'm going to share this with you in terms of how can we all achieve more. How can we achieve more? So we'll talk about how does this apply to work and how does this apply to life as well. But what's the basic of improving productivity? What are the things, right? So productivity, it is about achieving more, but there's this other word. So efficiency is the other one that comes when we naturally talk about productivity. But it's not so much about doing more and more and more, which is about speed and efficiency. The word effectiveness kind of shadows efficiency, isn't it? If it doesn't, it must. Because, let me just see if I can. No. Because it's not about just doing more stuff. And as you would know, effectiveness is about doing more of the right stuff. So if we can have this balance of not only doing more, but also how do we do more of the right things. So this is what we're going to talk about. Now, when we're trying to improve productivity, there's three things. There's three things, and all the topics we're going to be talking about this week, the five are basically based on these three concepts. And there's Craig joining us from Japan. So full international team. Welcome, Craig. So the three things that kind of like the secret recipe in everything I do is identify, which is about identifying opportunities. And then we prioritize, and then we implement. Now, I know how simplistic those three words are. Now, do not undervalue or underestimate the power of those three things, or do not underestimate the power of simplicity. Our brains are wired to look for complexity as value. So we value a lot of complex stuff, and we tend to overcomplicate things when we don't need to. Sometimes we think, that we got something that's really valuable or that we got a lot out of something that's really complicated. But it's not. If you look for history, if you look at the world, and people, brilliant people like Einstein have simplified things. How simple is F equals ma? He's, sorry, that's not Einstein, is it? That's Newton. Einstein's equals mc squared. Bit more complicated than F equals ma. The Newton theory, but the laws of physics, the laws of the world are simple. So identify, prioritize, and implement is simple, but do not underestimate it. So today we're going to deep dive into the first thing. Obviously, we can't prioritize anything if we haven't identified stuff. You can't implement anything if we haven't prioritized anything. So today we're going to talk about how do we identify opportunities. The thing with identifying opportunities, now you would all appreciate either you worked in a business or you're working with a business, if you're like me, or you all have had some kind of experience, what business life or work life is about, right? So when identifying opportunities, we all get it, right? It's about waste. It's about waste that the waste that we see. It's pretty obvious, right? What goes into the bin, that gets taken away and going like, damn, we paid for all of that, and then we just basically sent it out as product that hasn't been transformed into something that we could sell. And we also look for things in our profit and loss statement. We look at the P&L and we look for all those red numbers, the negative variances, because we set a budget and then we haven't performed to the budget. Now, they're kind of the obvious ones, right? From a work perspective of what waste is. Now, I'm going to go beyond what obvious is, because you didn't have to waste 45 minutes of your time today to come and learn something obvious. So I'm going to look at this thing about the stuff that's not so obvious. How do we identify the not so obvious stuff? Because they're the diamonds under our feet. Once we get a grasp of how we identify those, then we realize, oh, brilliant. We can see a lot of waste. Now, in personal life, also there's things that's obvious. We look back in time, we kind of reflect the day spent, the week spent, the month in review, and and we look at, kind of wasted yesterday, or the weekend, or that's obvious, isn't it? We all have those moments of, damn, could have achieved a bit more, could have had a bit more, done a bit more. They're kind of the obvious ones. The thing with productivity, what I've found, particularly working with businesses and over the last couple of decades, just want to check something. You can all see my screen, right? Oh, see my. Yep, you got me on speaker view. Okay, great. All right, because I'm not sharing anything, so just want to make sure you can. Yep, thanks, Laura. Laura and Lauren. The thing with this hidden waste, or the stuff that we can't see, is, remember is it the 1990s? I think it's 1990s. Bruce Willis' Sixth Sense. If it's not 1990s, it would have been early 2000. The movie The Sixth Sense, and Bruce Willis plays this doctor, and there's a little boy. And he says, I see dead people everywhere, right? Because the boy can see dead people everywhere, but Bruce Willis's character, the doctor, can't actually see the dead people. But at the end of the movie, all of a sudden it just occurs to him what's going on, and then he can see it all as well, right? So what we're going to be talking about things today. Not just the obvious stuff that you can pick on, but what are the dead people, right? Can I make you see all this stuff? Now, after today, either you're going to love me or you're going to hate me, all right? You're going to love me because you're going to see so much opportunities that, whether it is work or in life, you're going to see like, oh my God, all these opportunities that we can work on. You're going to hate me because everywhere you go, whether it's the service station or whether it's at the supermarket or whether it's in your own home, you're going to be like, oh my God, Ishan, there's so much inefficiencies. Yeah, welcome to my world. So how do we, what is this thing about wasted opportunities or the hidden? So let me share a couple of examples. Both from work and also from non-work perspective. So, but 10 years ago, 12 years ago, many of you know I was working at Arnott's. And I was walking the shop floor, and we were running Cheds. So Cheds is the biscuit that goes into a cheese board. It's the one that's got pecorino cheese sprinkled on it. They taste divine straight off the oven. The biscuits that you taste from the supermarket after, I don't know, a couple of months it's been on the shelf, nothing like what they taste straight off the oven. Now I was walking the line. Now here's the thing. That line that I inherited, I was so lucky to inherit that line. That line was running like a Swiss machine, well-oiled Swiss machine. That was the good and the bad, is that there wasn't much improvement, or so it seemed at the time, to kind of shift performance, right? So it's just like, damn, right, it would have been much better if it was a broken line, but it wasn't. So from a P&L perspective, it was fine, right? We were running on the edge, right? But on most times we were doing just slight positive variances, right? So it's the line, it was the reliable line. Again, not my doing. I just inherited that when I took over that line. So if I were to spend my time sitting in the office and going through the P&L trying to find opportunities, it wasn't there, right? Because it was a good line. So I was walking the line. Was talking to Steve, the operator, who did the forming and cutting, which is the part before the oven, where the biscuits get formed into a sheet and just get cut out into little parts, and then it goes into the oven. Where the cheese was actually getting sprinkled, because you sprinkle across the band, there was a lot of excess cheese that was getting sprinkled. That was considered as waste, but it was built into the cost because that was the best way that they knew at the time. Some of it got, along with the dough that didn't go into the oven. So it's a lattice. So that got back put into the kind of the beginning of the cycle. So all of it just didn't go to waste. But there was a fair bit that actually didn't make it onto the biscuits. And I don't know how, we were just chatting, and Steve all of a sudden, one conversation led to another. Steve, the operator, said, "Hey, Ishan, you realize if we just move the cheese sprinkler from here to this spot over here, there's a little conveyor underneath and there's a gap because the biscuits gets transferred across two webs. We could actually put a conveyor underneath and recover this excess cheese." I was just like, "Oh, that's not a bad idea, Steve." Yeah. Long story short, we had to buy a new sprinkler, $20,000. Yeah. Pecorino cheese, fairly expensive. And the savings were tenfold, 200 grand a year. Because of, that we could recover from that, right? That opportunity did not exist in the P&L, if I were to just simply look at the P&L. Right. And this is not an isolated incident, whether it's just across the country, across countries, different teams, different businesses. There are so many, right? And most of you who are working manufacturing, if you know a little bit about lean manufacturing, you would know that there are 7 different lenses to look through to find more waste. But I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to give you 3 that works across everything. One more example, and then we'll kind of get into the core of what we want to talk about today. In personal life, when I was writing my new book, Advance, I was talking to British rowing champion Bent Hunt Davies. So Bent Hunt Davies wrote this book called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And it's actually a trademarked term, Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? He's now a keynote speaker based in UK. He runs programs as well to help companies. But I was fascinated with their story because as a rowing team, 2 years prior to Sydney Olympics 2000, Bent Hunt Davies' team, so he was part of the men's 8, so rowing. Their team, up to 1998, hadn't won a single international team competition at all. Not a single international competition. They hadn't come anywhere near getting a placement. And in year 2000, Sydney Olympics, Penrith, they took out the gold. So I was fascinated. And then subsequently he wrote the book, Will It Make the Boat Go Fast? And I was talking to Ben as a case study for my new book. How do you do it? What's in it? And Ben himself was telling Ishan, it might sound really simple when I tell you this. And I said, no, you're talking my language, Ben. He said the core was actually identifying the real improvement opportunities that was going to make the boat go faster. He said it wasn't about the best technology, because that technology was also available to everybody else. So it had to be how they worked as a team, and it's all these little 1%ers. And what they did was they went through a series of how to identify real improvement opportunities, and then they filtered it, which is the prioritizing part we'll talk about tomorrow, through the lens of, is it actually going to make a difference or not? Now that's only one lens of prioritizing, but we'll also talk a few other lenses tomorrow. So you can see that we can identify and improve, obviously, work and personal life. Now I'm just going to switch cameras here, and I'm just going to talk about the three things that I want to talk through. So, at the core of what we're going to talk about is basically wasted. If it is business, we're talking about wasted money, right? And I want to talk about this thing. If it is about life, it's actually life energy we're talking about, because that's what we feel frustrated about, isn't it? That we feel, well, this is, well, I'm hoping this is true to you as well. I certainly feel like that, we're born with a fixed amount of life energy, and you can calculate that in any way you want, but it's kind of roughly, obviously it's got something to do with the number of years that, our longevity, and also what's the capacity that we've got to do things, right? And it's a combination and a multiplication of those two things. So if the core of what we're trying to do is how do we optimize and reduce the things that basically sucks out our life energy and things that basically waste our business dollars, and if we have a framework to do this, then I think we're on to a winner. So the three things, if we simplify this, the first one's going to be the obvious one, and you will all get this, is the time, right? The wasted time. In everything we do, the wasted time is kind of, well, it's not a lot we can do about it, and but we want to look at beyond the obvious of how do we waste time, and we'll go into each one of these things in a minute. The other one that I want to talk about is this concept of excess. Yep, that's still on the screen. And excess shows up in a couple of different ways if you split work and life. If it is from a work perspective, or it can have two different meanings. It is a kind of the storage, like the buffers that we keep. So things that we store and hoard, excess. Or it could also be unnecessary stuff. As I said, we'll go into these three in a moment. So it's kind of the wasted time, and then there's the excess storage or the unnecessary. And the last one is strain, burden, strain. Now, to me, kind of forms our waist triangle. And I think these three are the only three things you need to remember. So this is the strain slash overload. Either at work or in life. Let's go through this one at a time. So if you're talking about wasted time, there's the obvious one, right? You know, just diddly squat. Could have done a bit more. But there's also wasted time, which is kind of not so obvious, where you're standing in a queue. Right? Could be the supermarket. You're standing in a queue. You might feel like, no, I'm actually getting my things done. It's, you know, we're doing something, but you're actually not doing anything, right? You're just waiting for your turn. So that's a wasted time. Right? It could be just on the weekend. I was going to do something with my wife in the garden, and my wife said, "Yep, ready, let's go." And so I was in the garden, and then 20 minutes later, I'm just coming back and saying, "Darling, you're coming out?" And then she was still stuck inside, right? I was going like, well, I kind of did bits and pieces to make myself useful in the garden, but kind of missed that 20 minutes. When we, you know, there's all the email stuff that we all know of, right? And we all have different ways, right? You know, we might think that, no, I'm on top of my email, right? Because I'm one of those people who stay on top of the inbox. But if you're dealing with 50 unwanted emails and you're just basically selecting and deleting, you're still wasting time. You're better off if you can actually find ways to unsubscribe from those unwanted lists altogether. Then you don't have to deal with it at all, right? So there are all these layers that you can dig deep. There are things that you feel that you're being productive, but you actually look back and go, oh, what did I actually do? And this is true when we particularly look from a work perspective, where you see a lot of people, you know, in manufacturing, right? You forgive me for talking manufacturing, that's kind of my background. And you see a lot of people walking around with pieces of paper and a pen, right? We feel that if you've got a pen and a piece of paper, we are all being productive. And they're all walking around in these factories, and you go like, what are they doing, and where are they going? And you realize, yeah, they're trying to actually make things happen and get things out the door. But you know they're not being productive, right? You know, there's all that wasted time. So time is not just about didn't do anything at all, but there's all the other layers of the illusion of being productive, but you actually wasted time. The excess part, which is at the top of the triangle, kind of the storage. And so there are two parts to it. It's called the excess storage, or excess from a point of doing unnecessary stuff. So the storage stuff is, imagine this. From a personal point of view, you're at the supermarket, there are things on special. You didn't want it, but you're going to buy it anyway. It's on special. Right. Cereals on special, right? I'm gonna buy two. Or you get the classic two for the same price, right? They, you know, how they put it on half price. They go like two for the price, like any two for $5 or whatever it is. So you go, oh yeah, great. Firstly, you obviously spent something that you didn't want to, right? It's kind of the core of the triangle. So now you've allocated that money. But the other thing is, what's happening in your pantry? Now your pantry is kind of getting full to the point that, do you ever come across stuff, you know, after those items have expired? and you're kind of doing a spring cleanup, and then you realize, oh, it's still in packaging, oh, expired, out. Um, so there's all that, and we know in work point of view, having excess storage is kind of the known knowns of, well, you're just tying up inventory, you're tying up money. But the unnecessary part, which is also excess, for the perfectionist in us, because we spend time perfecting something or kind of polishing that diamond when it doesn't need to. It's the diminishing returns. We all know this, right? You know, I look at my 17-year-old son who's, well, he's obviously getting ready for his HSC next year. He's got an issue. He's got an issue of timing perspective, right? So I was just observing what he was doing, and he's got perfect writing, and he's just taking the time to, you know, underline with a ruler, and he's so detailed and methodical. And I was kind of like, hey, you know, these are your notes. You got to speed things up. You know, making it perfect and, you know, different colors and beautiful writing is kind of a bit unnecessary. So what are the things that we're doing that we know that little extra 15%, that last 15% only adds perhaps 2 or 3% value, right? I remember going to a cafe back in the day, pre 2000, and got a coffee and wanted a spoon. They didn't have spoons for the sugar, and they gave me this little pre-pack thing. It had a serviette, a spoon, and a fork, and in cellophane wrap, right? So they only had those things. They didn't have spoons only, and obviously I had to use it, but I was going like, it's an overkill, unnecessary. Those of you remember McDonald's 15, 20 years ago, if you got a burger, firstly, it was wrapped in the food grade paper. It was then gone into the box, and then they would put it into a bag, right? And then you had to undo it all. Take it out of the bag, take it out of the box, will not take it out of the wrapper. So it's all that unnecessary stuff. They've got much better now. Just going to pause for a minute and trying to see what are some of the maybe perhaps the not so obvious time stuff that you've either seen, or if you want to self-confess, the stuff that you work on, but also from an excess and unnecessary, just these two things, and we'll cover the last one in a minute. Just in the chat. Yeah, Rob. Yep. Going from one, you know, I know in manufacturing, we get it from sheets onto Excel spreadsheets, and then we transfer to another one, and yeah, absolutely. Yeah, data double handling. Yeah, meetings. Yeah, yeah. We all feel sometimes, we copy people all. I know, yeah, reply all in emails. Absolutely, Lauren. It's just like, come on, just even having to just select and delete. When people move people to BCC, like, you first copy somebody, and then in the reply I go, yep, thanks Rob, and I'm going to move you to BCC. You go like, thank you. You understand the world of productivity. So appreciative. The last one is the strain and overloading. Strain and overloading. So think about this example, right? I'm just going to talk about shopping and supermarket shopping, because it's although we are doing less and less of it these days, we all understand, right? Imagine this, right? You've just gone in and you only had a few items to pick up, right? So you take a basket, right? You take a basket and you start filling in, and halfway through you realize that, oh, the basket's getting full because you've taken a little bit more than what you wanted to take. And now you're stuck between, or should I go back and get a trolley? And you realize, nah, should be all right. Or you go like, better still, there's another basket close to the counters, and I'll just grab a second basket. So now you're carrying two baskets, and one heavy and one not, and you're kind of walking lopsided, right? Now, you might go through the supermarket and that's fine, but if you're looking at this from the lens of wasted life energy, you're definitely burning a lot more life energy, right? And the same is true if if that's the case at work as well. Imagine that you need to rush an order through because either you forgot, or you overpromised to somebody, and you have to rush this through, and you need to burn a lot of energy to get it done, right? So you're straining. It's a little bit like trying to drive this car and pulling a trailer, pulling up a trailer behind you, and you're just driving in the second gear, right? You got that burden and the strain that you shouldn't be, that you shouldn't have to waste, that you shouldn't, if you had systems in place. So want you to look for ways of where are you straining and overloading. I'm just going to go back to the drawing for a minute and kind of just complete the picture. So we know there are a lot more ways of where are we wasting time beyond the obvious. Where do we have excess storage and things that we're doing that are not necessary, polishing the diamond, and where are we burdening ourselves? Because here's the thing, because all these things obviously contribute towards this thing. And for me, the kind of the obvious part is this, right? If there's wasted time, and we wasted the time in doing unnecessary stuff, I think there's an opportunity cost which we all understand. There's that opportunity cost that we've lost. And then if we are doing unnecessary stuff, but we're also running in the third gear, kind of in this strained mode, what we're doing is we're kind of just going to tilt it this way. There's a fatigue cost to the business or to yourself. Right. And finally, I think if we wasted time and we've overburdened and we realize that we're not going to be able to do everything because, hang on, we've lost time and we're still driving in the second gear, I think there's a failed cost because you're going to miss out on certain things. You're not going to be able to do it all. So there's a failed cost to it. So just goes to show, I guess, the importance of these three things. And you only need to think about, again, time from a beyond the obvious. Where are we keeping excess stuff and doing unnecessary stuff? And where are we overloading? Because here's the thing, and there's two things, and then we can spend time just answering any questions, right? Because to me, this is the procrastinator, right? Typical procrastinator. And we definitely know this is our perfectionist. And if we are always overloading ourselves, if we're always saying yes, if we're always trying to put too much onto our plates, we kind of become, I think the correct word is a appeaser, but I want to stick with the P word, so I'm going to call it a promiser. And this is what happens, right? So I just want you to be aware of, in work or at home, beyond the obvious, where are we wasting time? When are we being a perfectionist or keeping excess stuff? And when are we promising too much? Because what we miss out on is that in this case, you could have done more, right? That's what we miss out on. And over here, you could have done with ease. Finally here, just making sure you can see it here. You could have done it all. So we could do everything we want and more with ease. And all we need to do is focus on beyond the stuff that we waste time on. Look for things where we spend unnecessary time and energy on, and where are we burdening ourselves and our teams. Let me just position that. So if you want to take a screenshot, feel free. I think that's it. That's lesson 1 simplified on how do we identify. So I've got 5 minutes, and I'm happy to stay online for as long as Q&A. So if you need to go now, that's pretty much yeah, absolutely. Let me just put that back on. Yeah. Thoughts, comments, questions. Thank you, thank you, Bernie, for that comment. Yep. Thank you. How do you see? Do you see either in work, or let me just come back here. I'll share this along with the recording. I'll scan and I'll send this across. Just keen to know how you see these things. Again, it could have been stuff that you don't know, but yeah, for us in manufacturing, it's always been about the 7 ways or the 8, depending what book you read. But I think it's much simpler than the 7 or the 8. This is it. If you do these 3 things, and if you always watch out for these 3 things, everything else kind of falls into place. And I couldn't help noticing that these 3 things kind of have helped me as I'm trying to incorporate more and more of this stuff into my own life. So over to you. Questions, comments, thoughts, feedbacks, other than what's already there. Yeah, interesting. Lauren, and thank you. Lauren's also one like myself who's interested in productivity and any improvement, right, Lauren? So yeah, do we have a natural? I'm not sure whether we have as individuals. You're welcome, Declan. I'm not sure whether we have just one biasness towards, we have this weakness, but I tell you what, I think we are all biased towards finding or seeing. I don't think we all see the complete picture. That's my view. And I think that's why it's like anything else. I think if you keep looking and all of a sudden you train yourself and you see it everywhere, like the dead people in Sixth Sense. So it's not so much having, but I think it's just seeing. Yeah, exactly. Going back to kind of the manufacturing world and the fundamentals of improvement. How do you not overburden? How do you not run unbalanced? And how do you continually find waste? But yeah, so it's kind of been a combination of those three. Thank you, Bernie. Any questions? Comments? Thank you. Bernie's giving a thumbs up. I can see. Let me just go to gallery view. So tomorrow we're going to talk about. If this is how we're going to identify. So the first problem we normally have is that, what are we going to improve on? Because there's no point in just improving everything and anything. It needs to be something that's actually going to make your boat go faster. Sorry if I can borrow Ben Hunt Davis's phrase. So once we've identified the problem we're now going to have is, it's not about not seeing stuff. Now we've just seen too much or too many. And then the second problem of this, what do we do? What do we do? Right, you get paralyzed because we see too many things to work on. So tomorrow I'm going to share two frameworks. One you might know, it's known as the pain gain matrix, but I'm just going to give a few tips that has made it a bit more effective for me. That we're going to cover that very quickly. But the one that I'm going to cover in a bit more detail is kind of this universal technique. And every time I share this, people actually say, wow, extremely useful, extremely versatile, can be applied in work or personally. And it can be for just prioritizing your to-do list. It can be to prioritize your task list, or if you've got too many projects going on, it can help you to prioritize your projects as well at work. So join us tomorrow. If you can't, I will be sharing the recording. So thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the day. Have a good week and be productive. Bye.